Okay, so my first video today, I'm going to be talking about legendary Hollywood actor James Dean. I was going to do the video the other day on September 30th, which is the anniversary of his death, but a few days late. He died on Friday, September 30th, 1955, in his Porsche Spyder 550 on U.S. Route 4. At the time, 466, which is now Route 46, and near Paso Robles, I think is how you pronounce it. Yeah, it's a Mexican name, California. So anyway, he only starred in 3 movies. He did quite a bit of TV work, though. He was in several TV programs in the early 50s. The movies that he starred in was East of Eden, which was the first one released. He played Cal Trask in it. It's set during World War I, but it's not a war film. He gives a great performance in it, but the movie itself is kind of slow moving. Yeah, it is what it is. Like I said, it's worth it just for his performance. If he wasn't in it, honestly, I don't think anybody would give it a second look. But it's not a bad film by any means. But it's not everybody's cup of tea. Now, his second film, which I have right here, is Rebel Without a Cause. It was actually released after he died. Like a couple weeks after he died, or a week after he died. It's really done well. There's a scene in it which is called a Chickie Run, where they drag race a couple of cars toward the edge of the cliff, and the first one that jumps out is the chicken. It's the first movie to have one of those in it. It's definitely one of the greatest films ever made, Rebel Without a Cause. It's the whole package. It has great background music. It has a lot of stars, including James Dean himself, of course, Natalie Wood, Salamino, Jim Backus, Ann Doran, who played his mother, his character's mother in it, Corey Allen, who went on to become a director, William Hopper, and that may have been what Dennis Hopper was called at the time, or maybe Dennis Hopper. Well, I know Dennis Hopper was in it somewhere, so maybe the same thing. It was directed by Nicholas Ray. This is the Blu-ray of it. It's a really good film. His last film that he starred in was Giant. It's like a story of Texas, like oil and cattle and stuff like that. It's not a Western, though, so don't go watching it thinking you're going to be seeing a Western, because that's not how it is. But it's a really good film. It features Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, directed by George Stevens. Now, Rock Hudson didn't get along with James Dean. I guess they didn't really get along in real life, but the news of James Dean's death actually upset Rock Hudson. So you had to believe there was at least a mutual respect for each other between them. But I don't know, who knows. But before that, he starred in any film. He actually had a few bit roles in movies. Fixed Bayonets, which is a Korean War film. Has anybody seen My Gal? I've never seen that one. Sailor Beware, which I think is a Dean Martin film. Never seen that one either. And Trouble Along the Way, which is a John Wayne football sports film. I've seen a little bit of that, but I didn't see, of course I didn't watch the whole thing, I didn't see where James Dean was in it. Now there is another one floating around that he said, I think it was, seen this like last month, I think it was, that he was had a bit role in Day the Earth Stood Still, 1950-51. So I was like, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So That's pretty cool. He's in a sci-fi film. So anyways, I want to talk about some of the movies and documentaries made about James Dean. One of the best movies made about him is this one right here. It's called James Dean Live Fast, Die Young. This is the special uncut version, which is the version you would want if you want to get this film. It has to say special uncut version at the top. You get the other version. There's a version by Digiview, distributed by them, that's heavily edited. It's like censored and all that shit. So it's like why'd you even bother releasing it if you're not gonna, release it the right way? So this is the right version of it. It's also known as James Dean Race with Destiny, but again, that's like the cut up version. So Casper Van Dien plays James Dean. Also features Robert Mitchum in his last film. It's really done well. George Barris customized a Porsche Spyder 550 for the film, who also did James Dean's original Porsche. So that's pretty cool. Now this film gets a lot of flack, and I really can't understand why, because despite the fact that when it came out relatively quietly, not a lot of people knew about it. Casper Van Dien played a good James Dean. Shows a little bit of his little crazier side, which James Dean did have. I'm sorry if some of y'all don't believe that, but he did have a crazy side, and he also had, well, he hung around Vampira. They didn't show that in this film, but he hung around, before Elvira there's Vampira, so he hung around her. So he had like a dark side, basically. But film's really done well. There's a couple like little errors in it where toward the end somebody obviously didn't move their car, so you get a glimpse of like a modern like Nissan or something in it. But that you'll have that in a lot of films, though. Also, if you look in the upper corner of the garage toward the end of the film, there's a Grease movie poster. That's at least forgivable, though, because it was set during the 50s. It wasn't released in the 50s, but it was set during the 50s, so that's at least forgivable. But nonetheless, it's a great film. It doesn't deserve all the flack that it gets. Casper Van Dien did a really good job as Robert Mitchum, and Carrie Mitchum, who is I think his granddaughter, played Pierre Angeli. Yeah, so very good movie. It came out in 1997. Before I go any further, I got to address the James Franco one. Now, James Franco is a really good actor. He played in Fly Boys, did a good job in that. He's got eyes like James Dean, but if you look at his facial features and you look closely, you have to look closely at the real James Dean, and they look nothing alike. So I just don't think it was a good choice for him to play James Dean. But the problem is that film was heavily promoted. They basically shoved the previews down people's throats, so it made it impossible for you to ignore it. But it doesn't work. I mean, it says that some of it's based on facts, some of it's based on an educated guess. Well, people don't expect movies to be biopics to be 100% accurate anyway, but there was one thing in it that I haven't heard anything about anywhere else but this movie that said that his father wasn't his real father. Now, that's not mentioned in any other documentary, that's not mentioned in any other movie, that's not mentioned in any book I've read on James Dean. And I've liked him since I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And I'm 31 now, so I should tell you something right there. I mean, it's not a bad film, completely bad by any means, but it's just not the definitive movie about James Dean. That being said, there's quite a few movies about him. I haven't even seen them all yet. There's another one called Life, where it has to deal with the guy that photographed him, Dennis Stock. I think his name was Robert Pattinson, who was in Twilight, plays Dennis Stock, and Dane something or other plays James Dean. And I guess he did a good job with it. Haven't seen that one yet. That's a more recent one made about James Dean. But probably of the ones I've seen, it's on disc 3 here. But this set, it's in the collector's tin. It's called James Dean, or James Dean Portrait of a Friend, and stars Stephen McHattie as James Dean. You can see the real James Dean in this first and second picture, and then you look at Stephen McHattie. And see how in that third pic, see how much he looked like James Dean. That had a lot of more accuracy to it. And you got a lot of James Dean's mannerisms correct. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything his friend William Bass said about him, but other than that, it's a really good film. That's why I put the Live Fast, Die Young one in this tin, because it fits in here, too. There's two more ones on here. One is the original first documentary about James Dean called The James Dean Story, which came out 2 years after he died in 1957, and it has interviews with people that knew him, including his uncle in Fairmount, Indiana, some other personal friends and writers that knew him. Well, it was done pretty well for an early documentary. It's actually available a lot of different ways, like on by itself, and on like James Dean sets you can get with like some of his TV work. Now the first feature on here is a documentary, the James Dean Classic, but it also features a TV show with James Dean, which normally you just see clips in these documentaries, but this actually has a full-length episode. It's called The Unlighted Road, and James Dean plays a character that gets a job in a diner and gets involved in a murder plot. So it's like a murder mystery kind of thing. It's really cool. He does a good job in it. Really has that vibe of that era. Maybe a little bit of film noir, which was popular in the 40s. So it's he gave as good a performance in the TV show as he did in any of the films. So I enjoyed it. That's why I got this collector's tin. I mean, there's other of his TV work that he did that I will get later on down the road. But he was only 24 when he died, so he was figure September 30th, 1955. It was might as well say a full year and almost 10 months to the day when Hank Williams died. So it's like two people that died prematurely within that time frame. Now, the interesting thing about that is that James Dean was in a lot of TV shows in the early 50s, as I stated in the beginning of this video. So it's possible that Hank could have actually seen him on TV. Never know. But, definitely, James Dean was definitely one of a kind. Now I have to address this. I hear a lot of this this shit that frickin' saying that he was gay and all this, and it's like there really hasn't been any frickin' evidence to suggest that. Now supposedly he registered to get out of the draft as a homosexual. Well, you know what? A lot of people did that back then if they didn't want to go in the army. That shit don't work nowadays. But apparently it did back then. That's all you had to do. Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, I guess, in order to get out of doing military service, he and some other friend of his together pissed in a cup. Not sure exactly how that was supposed to work, but apparently it did. And I know Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys almost got in trouble for not wanting to go in the army and shit like that. But anyway, that's what people did back then. But Elia Kazan, who directed East of Eden, reported that James Dean and Pierre Angeli were making love in the dress room. And Pierre Angeli said that before she died that James Dean was the only man that she ever really loved. So even when she was married to singer Vic Damone and whoever the hell the other guy was she was married to, it just... And if you look at pictures in them together, and they're like, well, it was a publicity stunt. It's like, no, it wasn't. You look at the pictures of them together and the way that they looked at each other, it wasn't a publicity stunt. James Dean was also with Ursula Andress, who toward the end before he died, he was actually trying to learn German so he could curse at her in her own language when they argued. So that's pretty interesting. So there had to be something there, too. Because he could have just said, fuck it, but if you're going to go to the trouble to learn another language so you can argue with somebody in their own language, that's, yeah. Thought that was kind of funny. Now, James Dean and Pierre Angeli were actually slated to do a movie together. Somebody Up There Likes Me, it was called. And there's actually or at least one picture of them rehearsing the lines together, and you can definitely see there's chemistry between them. But he was supposed to play Rocky Graziano, the boxer. Now the movie was still made. Paul Newman was in it with Pierre Angeli. Now, not trying to be mean about it, but you know, I have no interest in it. James Dean was in it. Probably check it out. But now he was I heard something about him wanting his friend to write a Jekyll and Hyde thing. So if that's true, which I'm not 100% sure that is, but if it is, that would have been cool to see James Dean in a horror movie thing. I actually think he played the monster in production of Frankenstein on stage. I do believe. I don't know if I got him confused with somebody else, but I'm pretty sure he did that in college or something. He played Frankenstein's monster, so he definitely had the range to act in a horror movie. Now, if he had survived, you know, Might have been in some of those movies in the 60s with Vincent Price. You never know. But James Dean's cool though. How I got into him back then was I had this movie called Mischief. Show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like. This came out in 1985. It features Kelly Preston, Jamie Gertz, who was in Twister, Terry O'Quinn, which I think was the guy on Lost or something like that, Catherine Mary Stewart, and Doug McKeon. Features music like Chuck Berry, Elvis, Buddy Holly, Fats Domino, Gene Vincent, Little Richard, so it's got a lot of oldies in it. Now, you're probably thinking it's what, an American Graffiti knockoff? And it's like, no, this one stands on its own. I mean, of the movies that came out that were similar to American Graffiti, you couldn't really call any of them knockoffs anyway. Hollywood Nights stood on its own. Hometown USA, despite it, being uneven in some spots, really stood on its own. Good luck finding it. Lemon Popsicle was another one. I've never seen that, so I can't really judge that one. But anyway, this one, they go to see Rebel Without a Cause at the drive-in, and they watch the movie, and they watch the Chicky Run scene, which I've seen in a movie called The Heavenly Kid, where they drag race the cars toward the edge of the cliff. And I happened to watch Mischief, and I noticed that scene. At the time, I was like 7 or 8 years old, or something like that, and I never noticed that scene before. So I was like, "Hey, what movie is that from?" So found out it was Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean, and that's how I got into James Dean. This movie's good too, though. Mischief, because it's like they talk about James Dean in it, obviously. Another one, the Hometown USA that I mentioned, it's got this guy in it that models himself after James Dean. He looks quite a bit like James Dean too, or at least he did when the movie was made. So it's pretty cool. But it shows you how popular James Dean is. Ones like James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, ones like that stand the test of time. Now, not everybody gets that. A lot of people will fade with time, like singer Tom Petty died last night. Yeah, I don't think he'll. I mean, his music will be there, obviously, but I don't think he'll withstand the test of time the way James Dean or Hank Williams or any of those other guys have. Like I said, very few people live on like that many, many years after they're gone. Very few people get that. But so anyways, you'll find references to James Dean in a lot of 50s stuff, though. Watch like Grease at the beginning of it. There's like in the animated sequence, there's like a poster of James Dean. Yep. Stuff like that. He gets mentioned a lot in other stuff. He was Fonzie's idol on Happy Days, so he looked up to James Dean. So I hear him referenced a lot on Happy Days too. But I guess that's about it. Um, Thought I'd talk about James Dean. Like I said, the ones I mentioned are stuff you can get. There's also some songs about him, too. There's one just called James Dean by the Eagles. And there's one called A Young Man Is Gone by the Beach Boys, which is like a ballad, but it's really good. There's other ones, and I'm sure. I don't know if I know all of them. There's one called Mr. James Dean by Hilary Duff, of all people. But don't let that throw you off, because it actually is a good song, despite it being a modern pop song. It came out in, wherever the hell it was it came out, probably 12 years ago now, 12 plus years ago. But it's a good song, though. Mr. James Dean, it's called. That about wraps it up. So, see you next time. And thanks for subscribing. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. And I'll see y'all next time.